Hi folks, John Dunn here, RPG freelancer, publisher behind Meliorvia. I am up here at Immortals tonight.
What is going on, John? It is a great day to be here, and why is that?
Well, we got some fun stuff to talk about tonight, Mike.
I know you told me, you're like, I'm thrilled to talk about this today. I'm like, it's always fun, but...
This is really pretty darn cool. I took Latin in high school because, big nerd. And I, really enjoy Roman history and that whole era. And tonight, I thought we would talk about Lex Arcana. Right, so this is a RPG that is published by Quality Games, and it originally was published a few years ago in Italy, back in 1994. So it's been available in Italian for quite a few years. But there was a Kickstarter in 2018 that they did to do the English translation, and I'm pretty sure that came out in print in 2020, like late in the year. So I don't think we've had it on the shelf here for real long, certainly not since 2020. And this was the first chance I got to really check it out.
And what does Lex Arcana mean in English?
Well, law is Lex, and Arcana is the arcane or magic. So, law of magic.
Ooh.
Yeah. Written by Leonardo Colavini, Dario De Toffoli, Marco Maggi, and Francesco Nepitello. And as you can tell from those names, they're all Italian, right? So this was very much an Italian game. I'm told this is huge in Italy. But it's the setting that really drew me in. Like I said, studied Latin in high school, enjoy the language, enjoy the era. And this is, interestingly enough, not the first game that I have read and played that is set during the era of the Roman Empire where the player characters hunt monsters.
That is true.
I mean, I would have thought that was a sufficiently obscure genre that there wouldn't be multiple games about it.
Yeah, it did.
But I've actually written for one, which is Pinnacle's Weird Wars Rome for Savage Worlds. Now that is actually very different from this, but at its core, it is another game about characters in the Roman Empire going out and hunting monsters. And that is basically the premise of this one as well.
I feel like that time era doesn't get enough love when it comes to just supernatural disaster.
No, it really doesn't. I mean, there is not a ton of content out there set during the Roman Empire in gaming in general. So I thought it was pretty funny that there's two games out there with that same theme. In any case, though, they do approach it very differently. That one, you're basically a soldier in the army. This one in particular, though, you are a member of the Emperor's Praetorian Guard, an agent of the Lex Arcana who is very specifically tasked with going out and defending the Empire. One of the things that makes that work is that this is set in an alternative history. Rome has lasted longer than it did in our world's history, and that's because they have magic. And in particular, the Roman Empire has really good divination magic. So anytime they caught wind of something that might be disastrous for the Empire, they sent their agents off to counter that from happening and preserving the Empire. So it's set in the year 1260-ish since the founding of the city, which by our math would be in the late 5th century, so around like 460 something, 470. But they use their own accounting calendar because Christianity isn't something that ever happened, because that would have been a threat that could have led to the collapse of the empire.
But no, magic.
Exactly. Like I said, magic works. Rome has used their divination systems to sustain the empire. In this era, right, late 5th century, 1260-ish, since the founding of the city, the emperor said, we need to do more to keep the empire secure. And so he formed an order of monster hunters, and that is the Cohors Auxiliaria Arcana.
Ooh.
Yes. The cohorts of the auxiliary arcane, more or less, poorly translated. And the player characters are members of this order. They are custodes, who are part of the Praetorian Guard, the elite guards who directly serve the emperor.
Good salary?
Well, I mean, yeah, pretty much. It comes with a lot of perks, right?
Yeah.
You can say, I speak with the voice of the emperor, essentially, when you're outside of Rome, and people tend to do things in reaction to you saying that. There are 5 categories of these members, at least 5 that they talk about. Those are fighters, explorers, augurs, scholars, and diplomats. And then there's a secret 6th one that they don't really admit to, and those are the assassins. And they're more or less your class equivalents in this game, but there isn't really a strict class system. Which of those groups you're a member of is going to determine which deity sponsors you, and that does have consequences directly. It's not quite as restrictive as you might think of with a traditional class system. Speaking of the system, this is a unique game system. It's very specific to the setting. It's tied in. It's very heavily themed. There is a lot of Latin terminology that gets tossed around. It's basically an attribute and skill-based system. You're going to roll a number of dice with faces equal to the attribute plus skill that you have against a difficulty number. You can make that combination kind of as you see fit. So if you have like an 8 attribute and a 2 skill, you could roll a d10, or you could roll a d6 and a d4. There's benefits to rolling fewer dice just because if you get the maximum value on a die, you get to reroll and add to it so that dice explode, but it has to be all the dice of your pool. So you might not want to roll like 3 d4s if you had a 12 total versus rolling a d12. One of those things where you're comparing, well, what's my average roll versus what's my maximum roll? Character creation has a worksheet that's very well themed. It took a little bit of work for me to figure out exactly how it works. It's not incredibly intuitive. It's not insanely complicated. There are also 12 pre-generated characters, basically a male character and a female character for each of the different orders that I mentioned previously. Male versus female doesn't really have any mechanical differences. There was a reference in there where they said that women are more downtrodden during the time of the Empire. I mean, it's a fictional setting. I'm not sure that's really something you need to portray unless that's something your group's really into. There are 20 different provinces of Rome in this fictitious version of the Empire, and people can be drawn from each of those. Where you're from is going to influence your skill set. So if you're in a more frontier area, you're more likely to have, practical survival skills. Whereas if you're from, the city itself, then you're much more likely to have more diplomatically focused skills. And that's just a generalization. And there aren't any kind of modifiers beyond that for your ethnic background or anything. It's really, you came from this area, so you probably have this skill set. There are some very flavorful combat rules. There are magical rules, especially focused on divination, because the augur classification group, that order, that's their central focus, performing appropriate divination magic. Characters advance in a way that's tied into their deific sponsorship. So what god sponsors their order is going to directly influence how the characters develop over time.
Imagine being sponsored by a god.
Yeah, it's handy, really. I mean, you got the, hey, I need a little help down here. And sometimes somebody does it.
There's a Monster Energy sponsor, and then there's a god sponsor.
Exactly, yeah. There is a chapter for the Demiurge, which I believe is their term for Game Master. And these are really your detailed game mechanic rules, particularly environmental things. So, you're stuck in the desert. How do you deal with that? You're, on a ship at sea. How do you deal with that? Those kinds of environmental things. There's also some advice on running a campaign and a little more information on how divination magic might directly affect an adventure or a campaign as a whole. That can be really tricky to run if you don't plan things out in advance and make sure you're dropping the right hints at the right times. There is a great bestiary in here. That bestiary runs about 70 pages. It's really well themed. It does have NPCs and mundane creatures as well that are appropriate to the Roman Empire, but it's got a lot of mythological entities that you'd go, oh yeah, this fits in perfectly with something that I'd want to have show up during Roman times. There's about 30 pages of setting information. That's basically history, different regions of the empire, the current technology, society, and the religion aspects. Last part of the book are 2 sample adventures, both of which seem like decent ways to get you going into the campaign setting. It is published by Acheron Books in cooperation with Quality Games. It's about 310 pages. It's a full color hardcover, and it's $55. We do have it on the shelf here at Immortals Inc. or available directly through immortalsinc.com. And here you can see the inset with this nice, really well-themed map of Europe and North Africa and the Middle East during the time of this Roman Empire. Stop in if that looks like something that could be up your alley. I think this would be an awful lot of fun to play.
Well said, John. Let's go visit Rome, baby. See you guys next time.